Not very proud of what I'm about to do, but doing everything on a budget, like I was saying. Trying to do this under $1,000, so I'm reusing stuff I have, which is a 1.8T O2J single mass conversion flywheel, or G60 flywheel, whatever you want to call it, that I lightened. You can see it's nice and thin. I lightened that on the brake lathe at my old job. I have this spec stage 350 clutch disc, and then I have Old Faithful. It's a stage 2 plus spec pressure plate. I've had this for probably 6-7 years. This used to be in my VR6 Turbo Passat, B3 Passat. Yeah, this, I mean, you can see it's old. Gave it a little whack to clean the glazing off with the disc grinder. Again, on a budget, staying under $1,000. And going with the theme, I am reusing the same flywheel bolts that you're never supposed to use because they're torque to yield. Using the same ones, and again, if something fails, that's 20 bucks off the price, honestly. So we're just gonna hammer on these Guden tight, you know, the old German spec, slathered up with Loctite. Should be fine. These clutch bolts, I've always reused them, never had an issue. Same thing, blue Loctite. These are supposed to be 18, I think, maybe 14 foot pounds. Not very much. They're M7 bolts. I'm just gonna hammer them on there because if I two-step the balls off of it, flywheel goes, the clutch goes, and all that flies off. You guys can let me know about it. Good to go. A new clutch fork that's been, I've had it around for a long time. I didn't buy it. And a new clutch bearing that's been sitting around again for a long time. So that's the only new stuff going in the clutch, but got a little bit of grease in there so it can ride on the sleeve in there, and a little bit down on the pin so that can slide back and forth, and a little bit up there just so it doesn't squeak when the sleeve's in there. So this is just this easy. You just line up on here and give it up. There it goes, nice and solid. That'll work real nice. Just like that. Now give it a little push. See how the trans mount lines up. Right, so the Mark III sits right in here. You need to have this be a nice, you know, concentric kind of oval, I guess you would call it. That's because the how the trans mount is, it's got two like wavy washers that kind of like just go right in place and lock in here. So this will go right there. No bolts we have to take out, just bolts to put in. Got this really long guy, hangs out there. O2Js don't have this because their trans mounts are actually bolted on right here. Again, these don't take a lot of torque. A little Milwaukee can do it. Good to go. Alright, so right here, on the Mark IVs, this is where the engine mount bracket goes, and there's 3/16s that go through here, and these are all threaded. So I use a Corrado transmission brace, which is this, and you can see this has bolts that go through, and there's a threaded side on the other end. Technically, you can't use this, but it's easy because O2As, they have this same boss, but it's completely drilled through. So the only thing you have to do to modify to get this on here, so you can actually through bolt it, is you just run a drill bit through here, whatever is like an 11mm or whatever it is. So you cannot do it in the car. So do it outside the car. I've done it before. Let's see. Now it slides through. There's no issues. I'll put this in the car, but it just goes just like that right there, and just stabilizes the back half, keeps it all, you know, locked together. Usually this pin, can you see it? Usually this pin's right about here, but I have cut it off, ground this out, moved the hole down about 5-10 mil, and then welded the pin in right here, so it'll be a shorter throw. And then right here, this one I haven't done yet. I'll do it another day. You can either get a TT one where it actually moves this pin to about right here, and then you effectively get shorter throws, or you can you grind off the bottom of this and then punch it out, and then you can run a die on it and make it an 8x125, and then drill and tap a hole back here and screw it in further back. Pull this cup off. These axle cups always have to come off when you put the trans on, because of, as you can see, the bell housing goes behind it, so the engine and trans actually mate back here. So you got to unbolt that. I'll unbolt that, take it out. It's got to be swapped out for the 100mm stub anyway. I just have to put a rag or something in there because all the oil will come out. This is a used trans, again on a budget. It was like 50 bucks because the dog bone mount holes are completely gone. So for a Mark IV, it's basically useless. You'll never ever be able to put this in a Mark IV again, but it's perfect for a Mark III. This is the rear engine mount with the Mark III. Mostly, I'm pretty certain all 4 cylinders have these bosses. You can see there's one right there, one right there, one right there, one right there. So this bracket used to hold the intercooler piping on the Mark IV. It would go right up here behind this 8mm bolt and right here. Obviously now it's in the way, so that's one issue. And then since that's gone, obviously now I gotta figure out a way to route the stock piping. I'll have to be creative, but I want it to look as if it came straight out of a Mark IV, so I don't want that goofy, you know, pipe that goes over top of the transmission. I don't like it at all. But anyway, so the mount sits on there like this, but if you see right back in there, it hits the turbo coolant line. I made this little mark. You can see right here, that little notch is where it was hitting when I bolted it up tight. But I'm just gonna relieve it right there and go across, make it nice. So I was thinking about cutting it, but then I remembered get a nice belt sander. So just held it on there, let it kind of notch itself, you know, because that's round. So that's exactly what I was looking for. It's held on by 413s. Plenty of clearance. You can see that nice light gap through there. Nothing will be an issue. Now that'll bolt right on. Next thing to do would be to get the transmission on. I'll struggle with that because I'm by myself, so. That's not going anywhere. So this is what I was talking about with the engine mount bracket. This is actually the 2-liter one. Everyone says you can't use it, but I've been using it for well over a year. Ripping on it, never had it fail. So a VR6 one will not work just because a VR sits forward and any 4-cylinder sits backwards. So you need a 4-cylinder one. Any, you know, O2O, ABA, diesel, whatever. But if it's a 2-liter, like mine is, there's usually a little bracket here. You can retain that if you bend it right to bolt on the coolant pipe that goes across, but I cut mine off just cause. Right here is where you have to grind. So you can see I took a little baby chunk out right here, and then ever so slightly it was grinding and grinding, and then it just cleared. I mean, not much more to it than that. You just grind the thing until it clears. It's stamped steel. You're taking off barely any. It's thick stuff. Like, don't worry about it. Don't spend $200 on a TDI mount. You know, something that's pretty much obsolete at this point. But what you do need are VR6 starter bolts. These used to be able to get a lot of stuff at the dealer. I don't think you can get these anymore. You can see these ones were brand new. They've only been in there about a year, 8 months or whatever, but I bought these brand new from the dealer then. Same thing with the clutch pedal mounting bracket, and the gasket, and I believe there's a brace up there or something like that. Wherever the master goes. I bought everything from the dealer and it was really cheap, but now everything's, you know, like obsolete. People were going apeshit over some stuff. So if you can't find anything, you gotta look for these out of a Mark III VR or Corrado or Passat, anything that's a VR. So you can buy these things anywhere. They really help. You saw, I was able to do it fairly quick. I mean, it was a time lapse, but I was able to do it very quick by myself. You know, just by prying and sticking those in the hole, and then you can line the dowels up, start the bolts. It's easy enough. Just don't cross it or anything. As long as you're not a complete buffoon, I think anyone can do it. So let's try this bracket now. My bracket always fit the 2-liter. So let's see if it fits the, whatever this thing is, 180. This thing looks like it clears perfectly fine. Put it back here. Yeah, so I got miles of clearance. So don't let anybody tell you you can't do something. If you're in a pinch, make your own stuff. You can modify anything. This is still good for a 2-liter. Still good for a TDI. It's still good for anything. So if it's a 4-cylinder, you can use it to put it in a Mark III. There's also a lot of confusion about people doing the starter flips, because you can actually flip the starter upside down so the power wires are underneath. You can only do that with VRs. The reason you can do it with VRs is because you see the bell housing up here where these 2 bolts are? Well, on a VR, the starter is up here. Well, technically, the starter's still in the same location, but the bolts for the trans, the whole trans is shifted on a VR. That's why if you ever see, like if you're unsure of what trans you have or finding, if the starter hole is basically right next to this, right next to the upper bell housing bolts, it's a VR bell housing. And what that does is it shifts everything up so you have more space, so you can do the starter flip. But again, that's only on VR bell housings. Starter wiring and chassis harness and stuff like that runs through here. This one holds the power steering bracket down here. A little P-clamp bolt. 180 is now in place. I have just some punches, you know, drift pins, whatever you want to call them, but I have one in there in the front engine mount, one in the trans mount back there, and the big guys back here in the rear. So I just have to kind of like leave some tension on the engine hoist. That way I can start all the bolts. You know, you can't just go hammering bolts in like this. Everything's kind of like sits into its own place. So I'll just relieve some tension with the engine hoist, take one drift pin out, and just run a bolt in hand tight. Then go to the next one, then let the engine down where it wants to be, then tighten them all for good. But we'll be bang bang shooting in no time with two-step when it comes in. And honestly, that's all I want out of this car, is to just two-step everywhere. I have not heard a two-step besides a standalone. A two-step on a stock ECU that sounds as good as 180s, I haven't heard it. So if you guys have, leave some comments and I'll check them out. But 180s are gnarly. Enjoy that 180 Mark III.